My name is Dave Clark. Behind me is my 1974 Trans Am. I've had that ever since 1980. I just explained that because my 72 is not here today. I had to tow it out of the garage over the weekend. Purpose of the video is to talk about, I found the original motor for the 72 Trans Am. So I'm going to tell the story a little bit. There's be some documentation through this quick video that shows us retrieving it and securing it and bringing it home, and to tell the history of it. And maybe there'll be a little interview from the person we got it from. I always used to joke with my son Wade. As we were growing up, we'd ride our bikes and we'd go around and we would look in all the garages everywhere that somewhere there was a blue and white Trans Am in our hometown. I learned of this 72. I was at a car show. Somebody came up because of my 74 and was talking to me about my car, and he admired it and told me that he had a 72 four-speed blue car that he'd had for many years, 27 years I think he said. And we talked about it a little bit, and that was it. I would see him occasionally at shows. About 2.5 years later, he contacted me out of the blue and said it was time to sell his car. He indicated to me it wasn't really about money, it's about who got the car. He wanted me to have it, so I was honored. So one day my son and I agreed to meet him over here, about 2 miles from where I live. It was in an apartment building. They store cars in one of the parking garages there, and it's kind of like a TV show, especially for Wade, as we crept along the garage and the guy flips the door up and we walk inside and there's maybe 40 cars under covers inside the garage. So it was kind of cool. I never knew it was there all those years. And there in the corner sat this blue and white Trans Am under a cover. So we peeled the cover back, we took a look at it, looked like the real deal. He was gracious, let me write the VIN down so I could do a PHS history on it. We looked it over a little bit, and I said I'd get back to him. A little bit later, about a week, we made a deal for the vehicle. It's kind of sad when I went over there to get it. As he handed me the keys, he was crying. He had owned it since 11 of 83. The car was special to him. I would tell you that he loved the car. He was not very mechanically inclined, so the car spent most of its life in that apartment building garage, or at least that 27 years before we got it, 29 years before we got it, was in that parking garage. Used to start it up and drive it around. And it's part of the story. Once we got the car out and I drove it home, it stalled a couple of times. Somewhere in its life, a 455 station wagon engine had been put in it. They had house wire nuts on the wiring harness, how they spliced it in. So I would shake it, the car would start again, it would drive farther. So it was kind of fun. I made it home. I worked on getting the car in an operational condition. History on the car when I got it from him is he said that he had bought it in from Rocky River, which is the next town over. It had a 400 in it. It had the wrong seats in it. The dash bezel was missing. But he drove it around for a little bit, and then that 400 engine blew shortly after he bought it. So it sat for 10 years. Then he put a station wagon 455 in it. The whole time he had the car, he put less than 4,000 miles on it. That's one of the reasons the car survived. It had been repainted when he got it, and that's all I could figure out. One of the first things I did was take it down to the Trans Am show and showed it around a little bit and stuff, and it got some attention. But what I learned about the car is it wears all its original sheet metal, and had its original radiator, had its original 4-speed in it, original rear end, things like that. So I thought I'd start to look for the engine. One of the reasons I tried to contact the other owner is I could see a clue. Where did it come from? Did the engine come out? Was it a stolen car here in Cleveland? Whatever, some clues. I reached out to Smoke Signals, which at the time was Don Keefe. He was the editor, and I asked him about running an ad in there and how I should do it. And my fear was not to post the complete serial number, but just maybe all the serial number and leave off the last 2 digits. He advised me it would be best just to put the whole serial number in there. And I ran the ad for about 3 years in Smoke Signals to no avail. I also became part of the forum community, the Performance Years Forum, and I listed in the Lost and Found section ad looking for the engine. And some people piped in right away, and I got a couple of leads that I was able to follow up. But every time I got a lead or a little something like that, I would post on it to bump it up to keep the thread current, hoping that people would look in their collections. That is all in about the year 2013, 2014. So all the years of going to Tri-Power and going to the Trans Am Nationals, I was always hunting for the WM motor that I was looking for my car. So in the year 2019, I had found another WM Trans Am motor, and I had it rebuilt, and I put it in the 72, and I was going, because the car has this secondary paint job on it, so I was going more for the patina. And I got the engine, I put it in there, I was collecting the air conditioning parts, I collected the right air cleaner, some of the missing parts. And I bought an air cleaner from Ron Johnson. So 2019, while I was at the Trans Am Nationals, I brought the car over so Ron could take a look at it. And there's another parts guy there named Dennis, and Dennis is no longer with us. But I let them look at the car, and they were very gracious on what they saw and what they said might be right and not be right, and so forth. And Ron asked me for the history on the car, and I explained to him that the original engine is missing, and I had been looking for it. I told him that we got the car in 2012, but the owner I got it from got it in '83, and I went through it was missing the seats, and it was missing the motor, and missing the dash bezel, and so forth. And so Ron looked at me with a puzzled look, and he said, Dave, I may have your engine. I said, I remember a car, blue car, 72, that we took a 4-speed engine out of back in the 80s, early 80s. And my car was out of the South. I know came out of Alabama. I may have said North Carolina, but regardless, it triggered something in Ron. Fast forward 2 years later, I'm going out to the Ames Tri-Power show. It's Friday, and I just arrived. I parked my vehicle, and I was in a swap meet about 5 minutes, and I ran into Ron, and Ron was very excited to see me and said, hey, I got some good news. I need to talk to you. He was completing a deal, so I gave him a few minutes. I went around the corner, and I came back, and he told me that he had my motor. And that when he looked at it 2019, he reminded me of the story I told about it. He had taken a picture of the VIN. He's in the process of moving, but he found the block and let me know that he had it. So I was very excited about that. He'd known for about a year, but with COVID and everything, time just gets away. So we made a basic deal for it. We obviously a little verification had to be done, but he said he was going to bring it to the Trans Am Nationals about 4 weeks later. Will it be okay to take the pan off and take a quick look?
The Super Duty rods are the only ones that use a square bolt. If you look down through here, you can see the connecting rod bolt, and the heads of them are square.
Okay.
And they have a little dimple in them. You don't tighten them with a torque wrench. You have to tighten them with a stretch gauge and stretch the bolt.
Yeah.
Between 3.5 and 7 thousandths.
Oh, so it's not an actual. Okay. Interesting.
I got a bunch of special tooling just for this deal.
Looks like it's together.
Yeah.
My biggest concern is the area in between the camshaft and the crank is where they crack. So I'm trying to look at as much of that as I can and make sure there's no, because if it's cracked, then the block's done. So that's my biggest concern about the whole thing. But it looks pretty nice. The boards look nice. They're not all beat down. I mean, the lifters look nice.
But came out of a 71 Trans Am I bought in 82. And I restored it, drove it for a short time, drove it, around town. And, I was impressed how well it ran, but I really didn't drive it much. But in 2000, I had the car restored and I put a service engine in it, and this one came out, put it in my storage. And when I saw Dave 2 years ago, when we both discovered my car and his car came from Greensboro, I said, I might have your engine. So I took a picture of his VIN number. When I went home, I scraped the block, and sure enough, it was his engine. But I was reserving until I could see him in person, or closer time where the engine could get delivered before I told him. And when I saw him, last year was canceled, so we couldn't do it then. So this year in Norwalk, I saw him. I told him the good news as soon as I saw him.
It has SD internals in it. Ron tells the story that the original owner of the car gave up on the car, and one of his friends ended up with the car. And when he got the car, the block was gone, but the heads and the intake and were there. The seats were gone, and Ron said that's what triggered him to think that this may be the motor, because he remembers the block and the seats were gone. His friend, obviously, I'm assuming, put the car back together and sold it. That's how maybe it got the 400 in it. And it had 77 seats in it when I got it. Had probably repainted it. Ron is going to put me in touch with the individual that bought it. The engine went on to have a life. It went to a Pontiac racer down south who used it. When he built it, it has all SD internals in it. And he ran it, not exactly sure how he used it. Ron tells me that racer is still alive and is going to put me in contact with him. But he built it with all SD internals. It had 72 heads on it and so forth. Ron purchased the engine from him, and he had it in one of his 71 Trans Ams till the year 2000. He pulled the motor in 2000 out of the Trans Am. He restored that Trans Am and put its original engine back in it. Ron described it as a hell of a motor. He sold the top end of the motor off, but for whatever reason, he never sold the block and the pistons. It was special. It was special to him. He gave me the indication he really didn't have any intentions of selling it, but since I had the car, it was fate. That's where the thing belongs. So I'm excited that I have it back. And it changes the way that I look at the car. Now it can be a numbers matching car, transmission, rear end, and a motor, so that excites me. So I've made an attempt to document it over the years that I've been looking for it. And I did it through the ad, I did it through the forum, I did it through asking people, I did it through chasing every hunt down. I got lucky, but it is what happened. So what I've done with this and the purpose for the video and talking with Ron and collecting additional information is, it is the real motor for the car, and it's part of the car's history now, and I'll be excited to get it together and get it back in the car. Moving forward, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with the engine other than first we're going to disassemble it. We're going to get the block checked. and we're going to start the process of rebuilding it. I want to be careful on what I do because I want to do the motor correct for the car. The other motor I stroked and things like that wasn't the original motor. I wasn't worried about it. This motor needs to be put back together, I'm assuming the way it left the factory. And so that'll take a little time to collect the correct date-coded heads for it, the correct intake. I do have a carburetor for it that's correct. So I'm going to take my time and do that right. But as things move forward, I'll document it because I think it's important now for this car because it is a 72 Trans Am 4-speed, blue and white with air. And it's an early build. It's a 9C car. So it'll be harder to collect some of the date-coded parts for the engine because it is an earlier car. But there's a lot of people out there. I know I'll get some help and we'll get the thing together.